I'm dreaming of a white Purim, just like the ones I used to know.
Hi, my name's Gord Lindsay, and this is my second YouTube Chanukah video. My first video I hope you'll watch. It was Chanukah Funicula, and it's still available to be watched. I hope you do. I'm going to do something a little different this year because the Spirit moves me in a different way. I believe that the Torah, the Bible, wants us to think about another holiday when Chanukah comes around. And in fact, there is another holiday that comes to mind during the time of Chanukah. And I'd like to fulfill what I believe are the wishes of the Torah in singing a song about this other holiday.
And gregors fill the air like snow.
And now, this is the explanation of why I think the Torah wants us to think about Purim during the time of Chanukah. And by the way, vice versa.
I'm dreaming of a white Purim, clouds hang like heaven in the sky.
During the time of Chanukah, which is coming up, what are we reading in the Torah? The Torah being the Bible. We're reading about the story of Joseph. Now, what about the story of Joseph? Well, guess what? Well, first of all, it has some kind of a connection to Chanukah because it's a story of brothers, right? The Maccabees, who re-sanctified the temple and overcame the Assyrian occupiers, were brothers. They were a band of brothers, and they fought together and they won. So Joseph and his brothers is kind of related to Chanukah itself. Of course, Joseph and his brothers weren't exactly as together as the Maccabees were. Joseph and his brothers were at odds for a long time until they came together. But interestingly enough, there's an incredible set of parallels between the story of Joseph and the story of who? Mordechai. Story of Mordechai in the Megillah. And what would that be? Well, first of all, let's start with clothing. First of all, as we know, Joseph had his fancy coat. Some people say it's a coat of many colors, but actually it's a fancy coat. It might have been many colors, might not have been. It was fancy. It was nice. Mordechai was an important man, a member of the Anshe Knesset Gedolah, the men of the Great Assembly, and of course, naturally, he went to the fancy tailors of the time, and he would be, since he's an important man, he would be dressing in important clothes, looking very nice. Okay, so they start out kind of nicely in nice clothing, better than nice clothing. What happens? Well, as we know, Joseph has his clothing torn off him. His fancy coat, some call it the coat of many colors, was torn off him, ripped away, and then it was covered in goat's blood, and they showed it to his father, Yaakov, and said, "Oh, tore off, Yosef. Joseph has been torn apart by an animal," and so Joseph lost his fancy clothing. And also later on, when he was working in the household of Potiphar, he lost his clothes as well. And that way he got pulled off him there too. In each case, Joseph was wearing rags after that. He was thrown into a pit. Naturally, he wasn't wearing any fancy clothing then. He was wearing simple rags. And later on, when he went to prison in Egypt, he was also wearing prison garb. Similarly, Mordechai, a man who was probably very sartorially well turned out, because that means well dressed. When he was attending the Anshe Knesset Gedolah, he was a big important man in the community. When he heard that the evil Haman had made a decree to destroy all the Jews in the world, at that time, basically, they were all in that area, that area, basically the Persian Empire. What did he do? He tore off his clothes. Just like Joseph's fancy coat was torn off him, Mordecai tore off his fancy clothes, and he dressed as well in rags, sackcloth, and ashes. Okay, there's a parallel right there. But what else? It goes on. We also know that eventually Joseph's clothing, his fancy clothing, was restored. Eventually, at the end of the story, of Joseph's story, or towards the end of his difficulties, the end of his tsuras, Joseph was restored to wearing royal robes. From the prison garb that he had, he was now dressed in royal robes. And guess who else was dressed in royal robes? Mordecai. At the end of the story of Purim in the Megillah, Mordecai was restored to his sartorial splendor, but even increasingly so by given royal robes to wear, as of course recommended by Haman when Haman asked the king Ahasuerus, how would you honor somebody? How would the king honor? He said, well, the king said, I would dress him in royal. Oh no, the king asked Haman, how would you honor someone? And Ahasuerus, the king, wanted to honor Mordecai. And Haman gave the answer thinking it was about himself. Haman said, oh, dress him in royal robes. So the king said, fine, go dress Mordecai in royal robes. So you had nice clothes to begin with, torn off, back to royal robes in both cases. Now, how did it happen? How did it happen that they got these royal robes? Well, it has to do with sleep, the king's sleep, in both cases. Pharaoh, as we know, went to sleep, and he had these strange dreams. 7 fat cows, 7 lean cows, 7 big sheaths, 7 skinny sheaths, and the skinny ones and the lean ones were eating up the fat ones, and he didn't know what to make of it. He woke up. He couldn't sleep anymore. And we know that Joseph explained the dream to him and saved him. How did he save Paro and Egypt? He saved the king and his country because he told him, this warns us that there's a famine coming. And if you don't store up food in a very systematic way, the whole country is going to go, and you're going to go, everybody's going to die from famine, from starvation. And this is what we're reading during the time of Chanukah, you see. During the time of Chanukah, the Torah, in the cycle of the Torah reading, we're reading about the story of Joseph during this time. So Joseph saved the king when he had sleep problems with his dreams. Okay, so what happens in the Megillah? In the Megillah, Ahasuerus, the king of Persia, is having sleep trouble too. He can't sleep. They didn't have whatever it is you take nowadays to help you sleep. And he got up as he was restless, and he said, come, read me from the history, the annals of our people. And they did. And what did the king discover? The king heard the story that we are told in the Megillah, that Mordecai had overheard some conspirators planning to kill him. And he had reported it to the authorities, and the king had been saved. So Mordecai saved the king, just like Joseph saved the king. And that led, of course, to the question the king asked, has this man been rewarded? Ahasuerus in the Megillah asked, has this man, Mordecai, been rewarded? And they said, no, I don't think we gave him anything. So then that's how it ended up, that Mordecai got dressed in royal robes. And that's how Joseph got dressed in royal robes. But there's more to it than that. Because in point of fact, both were made second to the king, the viceroys, as they call him. Paro made Joseph second in command. And guess what Ahasuerus did for Mordecai in the Megillah? He made him second in command. And what else did he do? Well, they were both paraded through the streets. They were both paraded through the streets and proclaimed by the crowds. And in the Torah, Joseph was taken around in the Mishnah. The Mishnah is the word used for the chariot that the second in command uses, the Mishnah. And what does it say in the Megillah, right at the end, the last sentence? The Megillah says, and Mordecai Mishnah lemelech, says Mordechai uses the same word, Mishnah. When Mordechai was paraded through the streets, people were cheering, and in the last pasuk of the Megillah it said Mordechai Mishnah lemelech, uses the same word, the same position. He was the second in command as well. Now, the real clincher of this connection between the story of Joseph and the story of Mordechai is the name. The name that was given by Paro to Joseph. What was it in the Torah? The name was Tzafnat Paneach. Fine. What does that mean? Believe it or not, that means the same thing as Megillat Esther. Think about it. Tzafnat Paneach means the revealer of what is hidden. And guess what Megillat Esther really means on a deeper level? First of all, Megillah. Yeah, a Megillah is a scroll, we think, and Esther is the name of the lady who was one of the heroes of the Megillah, but actually it has a deeper meaning. Megillah means revealing, Gilui. It means the revelation, the revealing of, and what? Esther has another meaning too. It means hidden. For instance, in the Torah, God says, if I get angry with you, hastir et panai, I will hide my face, God says. And the word is hastir, because it means hidden. Esther means hidden. In fact, I think the word mystery might actually be related to the word Esther. Esther, hidden, hastir.
The whole Megillah is such a thriller to see how God helped us to survive.
And so, this is the explanation part 2 of why I sang a song, a rather silly song, actually, about Purim as a way of observing Chanukah. And I say it comes from the Torah. And I say it's because the Torah wants us to think about Purim during the time of Chanukah. And just to recap, there are many hints in the story of Joseph, whose story we're reading during the time of Chanukah, which correlate with the story of Mordechai in the Megillah. And this means that while we're celebrating Chanukah and we're reading about the story of Joseph in the Torah, something in our mind has got to say, hey, that sounds like Mordechai in the Megillah. And where we left it was the incredible connection between the name, Tzafnat Paneach, that Paro gave to Joseph, and as I said in part 1 at the end, Tzafnat Paneach means the revealer of what is hidden, and that's exactly what Megillat Esther means as well. Megillat Esther means the revealing of what is hidden. I explained it in part 1. Then the question is, what is hidden in the Megillah? What is the hidden thing that's revealed in the story of Purim? And there's probably a million answers to that, but the main one, as far as I know, is that what is hidden in the Megillah of Purim is Hashem. The name of God does not appear at all in the Megillah, so it's hidden. And the whole point is, for those of us who are believers, the whole point is that the story of the Megillah shows us the way God, though hidden, works his miracles in the world. In other words, the entire Jewish people were, God forbid, jeopardized by Haman and Ahasuerus' decree, and God worked behind the scenes in hidden ways to save us. And that was, he had Mordechai overhear a conspiracy to kill the king and report it. He had the king's sleep disturbed at just the point when the decree was going to, God forbid, wipe out the Jewish population. And the king's sleep was disturbed, and he got up, and he heard about the fact that Mordechai had saved him. These we understand to be Hashem working in ways which are hidden from the obvious, but nevertheless the workings of Hashem. So that's basically one of the main ways in which we understand the word Megillat Esther to be the revealing of what is hidden. Means we see, though God's name is hidden from the Megillah, we see how he works behind the scenes to create salvation for the Jewish people. So that's what's revealed by the workings of the Megillah, and that's what is hidden as well. And it's really an encouragement to all of us to understand that though God is hidden from our view at this point in our history, we should never despair. We should look at the story of the Megillah and realize that God is still at work. He's hidden right now, and we're hoping he will come back in a very obvious, manifest way. The temple will be rebuilt. And by the way, there's a connection to Chanukah from the story of the Parshiot in the Torah. In the same story where Joseph gets sent to, shall we say, kidnapped and abducted, is the story of Yehuda, the story of Judah, the head of the tribe, the Shevet, which is going to give us Mashiach through the descendants of the Jewish kings. And in that same parsha, which introduces the bondage of Yosef into slavery, we see the birth of Yehuda's son Zerach. Zerach being through a very meaningful interaction with Tamar, who, it's a long story. What can I say? But Judah showed his worthiness. When he could have, as a judge in the area, he could have been very embarrassed publicly, or he was embarrassed publicly. But the fact was, he had an option. He could have used his judicial power to get rid of the evidence by killing his daughter-in-law Tamar. But instead, he acknowledged his error. You know, they say power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely, but Yehuda showed that the power that he was enjoying at the time did not deter him from standing up and admitting his mistake. Rather than bury the evidence in terms of executing his daughter-in-law Tamar, he said she was right, and as a result, he himself became the progenitor of the kings of the Jewish people, plus Mashiach to come. And a significant relationship to the light coming back into the world at this time of year when we light the Chanukah candles, we have the birth of Zerach. Zerach means the shining, a shining soul and son of Yehuda, who overcame his concerns about his embarrassment. And let's put it this way. I don't even know if he was concerned. He immediately admitted that his daughter-in-law was correct. He did not save face. He did not misuse his power. He instead acknowledged her correctness and eventually gave her children, or allowed her children to come forward. I think that's right. I'll check it. If it's not right, I'll probably take it out of the tape. But if it's still in the tape, it means it's right. But the idea that the line of Mashiach was also described, the beginning of the line of the Messiah was described in the same part of the Torah, is also another remez to Chanukah, whereas the Mashiach, the light of Mashiach, is what's going to come eventually, and that was alluded to in the birth of Zerach. And Zerach means shining light. Zerach, like the sun, shines, Zoreach. Okay, so that's another allusion in the Torah at this point to Chanukah, but I'm talking about the allusions to Purim. And then, so the question is, what's the significance of it? What does it mean? I'll have you know that I think the Torah wants us to think about Purim on Chanukah because of the distinction we create. And it's a legitimate distinction, but the Torah wants us to go beyond it. What am I talking about, distinction? The halacha regarding Chanukah is that it is more of a spiritual celebration, and we observe it through a spiritual act of kindling lights, which represent the neshama and the light of Mashiach, the light of the Messiah, and the light of the temple, of course. It was through the recapturing and rededication of the temple that the daily tradition of lighting the menorah, the candle lights, was reinstated. And therefore, that's a spiritual act. And by lighting candles, we commemorate a spiritual redemption. As a result, there is no Seudas mitzvah on Chanukah. In other words, we don't have a form of physical enjoyment written into the halacha, although the Rambam says we should, but it's not in halacha, it's not in the code of Jewish law that we should sit down and celebrate Chanukah with a special meal to make ourselves feel happy in a bodily way. In fact, it's considered a spiritual festival. Now contrast that with Purim. By halacha, by the code of Jewish law, Purim is a time for us to make our bodies happy because our bodies, the body of the Jewish people, was saved on Purim. The evil Haman had convinced the king Achashverosh to get rid of all the Jews, God forbid, lo aleinu, never ever. But what happened was, it was something which threatened the physical existence of the Jewish people. And so, because we were saved, halacha dictates that we observe something which is more of a nature of a physical celebration, to celebrate the fact that we were physically saved. The body of the Jewish people was saved, so we make our bodies happy. So we have, in fact, in the code of Jewish law, the observance of Purim involves a Seudas mitzvah. Sitting down, like on Shabbos, you feed your body, you enjoy yourself bodily and physically. You sit down and you have a meal, a celebratory meal on Purim to correlate with the idea that we were physically saved on Purim. We make our bodies happy, we please our bodies, we have wonderful food and drink and enjoy ourselves, because that was more of a celebration of the physical salvation of the Jewish people. Now, the Torah says, however, yes, we understand the Torah said, not we, the Torah understands that there is a distinction to be drawn, but the Torah, in my opinion, wants us to go beyond it. Why? Because, as I said, there are all these hints during the time of Chanukah that relate to Purim, and guess what? During the time where we're celebrating Purim, there's something in the Torah which refers back to Chanukah. Now, what would that be? That would be the fact that during the time of Purim, what we're reading in the Torah has to do with the building and supplying and establishment of the Mishkan. The Mishkan was the forerunner of the Holy Temple, the Beis HaMikdash, and it was the holy tabernacle that was in the desert with the Jewish people where God resided. Mishkan and the word shoichen, neighbor, are related, and so is the word Shechina. It all means one thing, where God dwells, where the holiness of God dwells among the people, amongst the people, which is what the Beis HaMikdash was as well, where God took some of his great power and holiness from above and put some of that great power inside the actual building, which in this case, in the desert, where the Jews were, the history of the Jews during the Torah, in this case it was called the Mishkan. Mishkan, Shoichen, Shechina, all mean one thing: God was in the neighborhood. God was with power in the neighborhood. God was indwelling. In other words, some of the holy power of God was being felt by the people. God was right there, living there amongst them. That's why all those words are the same. Mishkan, Shoichen, and Shechina. Shechina meaning the Holy Spirit of God that indwells amongst us, and can be invoked with a minion, or there are various questions about that, but we want the Shekhinah to be with us as much as possible, if possible. And the way to do it was to have a holy temple, the Beis HaMikdash, which we recaptured or reestablished during Chanukah. But here we are at the time of Purim, and what are we reading about in the Torah? We're reading about the establishment of this exact holy building, the Mishkan. Not only that, in the Torah, the words are right there. The actual words are there. The way the Ribboni Shloim describes the Mishkan, when he tells the Jews to build them, tells Moses to tell the Jews to build a Mishkan, he says, "Ve'asu li mikdash," and you should make me a holy place. Of course, Migdash is the same as the Beis Hamikdash. That's what the Beis Hamikdash was. So we see that during the time of Purim, when we're celebrating our physical survival, God is saying, wait a minute, in the Torah, what are you reading about? In the Torah, you're not reading about your physical survival. You're reading about your spiritual survival. You're reading about the Mishkan, the Asuli Migdash. You're really reading about something very spiritual and holy. So what's the point? The point is very clear. In my opinion, anyway, the Torah does not want us to make a distinction between shall we say, an insurmountable distinction between Chanukah and Purim, just like the Torah wants to tell us that we should never really separate the life of the spirit from the life of the body. Purim, we're celebrating the survival of the body, and we're making our bodies happy. In halacha, in Jewish law, we have a nice meal, we enjoy ourselves, and we make ourselves happy physically. But the Torah says, wait a minute, I want you to remember the Mishkan. You're all this time now, you're reading about the holy Mishkan. Don't forget the spirit. And of course, at Chanukah time, when we're celebrating the spiritual redemption of the Jewish people, which also alludes to the coming of Mashiach, the Torah says, wait a minute, I want you to celebrate the spirit, yes, but I don't want you to forget the physical aspects of your being. I want you to remember about your physical joy on Purim. This means one thing to me, that the role of the Jewish person is not to be completely spiritual or completely physical, and it's to be what I would say is a kind of a union between the two. The spirit, we know, the neshama that we celebrate, is like something that comes from the kisei hakavod, the neshama part of our body, the spirit that indwells in us, like the Shekhinah does, is like, say, an arrow, a triangle pointing down. It's coming from above and is indwelling in our body. And the body is coming from the physical below, the ground below, and yet, if we live right, it's pointing up to the spirit as well. So if you do the two together, you get something like this. I like these audio-visual aids, right? You get something like this. If the Torah is trying to tell us, in my opinion, that if a Jew lives his life right, he doesn't just seek the pleasures of the body, but he doesn't forget them either. What he does is he makes them holy by enjoying the pleasure of the physical body in light of the neshama, in light of the dictates of the Torah, and that way the body enjoys itself, you enjoy the body, we enjoy our physical existence, but in a holy way. And similarly, we are not just spiritual beings. This is the fact. This is as they say, this goes without saying, but sometimes we forget about it. We are not, even when the holiest of the Jews is not just a spiritual being. We have a neshama, we also have a guf. The guf means the body. The Torah, in my opinion, is trying to tell us, yes, venerate the spirit, worship God, and get as spiritual as you possibly can, but don't forget to enjoy your life on earth in a physical body, because that's the role of the Jew, in my opinion. The role of the Jewish people is to live in the world and enjoy our worldly existence and physical existence, but within the light of the Torah. That is to say, everything you want to enjoy in physical, fine, wonderful, but do it in accordance with the dictates of the Torah, with the guidelines of the Torah. Then what you're doing is you're enjoying your physical existence and having all the pleasures you possibly could want, but you're doing it in a holy way, in a way which is kosher, in which the Torah prescribes. So yes, you have all of the pleasures of life, but you also are doing it within the framework of the Torah, which means you are elevating the physical existence to one which acknowledges the spiritual existence, and vice versa. Jews are not really supposed to be ascetic. They're not supposed to hide from the world and just follow and try to be spiritual beings only. We are created in such a way as that we are a union of two elements, many elements, but the primary ones the Torah is referring to here are the spiritual, the neshama, and the guf, the body, working together. And this is the world. Well, the Jew is supposed to make the physical life a holy one, but to enjoy it as a holy one, to enjoy it fully, but to make it holy. This is what Kiddush means. Why do you think we say we're making Kiddush on Shabbos? We're making Kiddush because we're taking the wonderful food and the pleasures and the sweets and the beautiful things we're going to enjoy on Shabbos. We are taking that and saying it's not just for the pleasure we're doing it. We're doing it to make the Sabbath holy. We're doing it to follow the dictates of the Torah. We're doing it to acknowledge the existence of God, the rulership of God. That makes all the pleasures that we have holy, and that makes the world a holier place. The world is a physical place, but we can bring the Spirit into it, and that's the role of the Jew, to make things holy. And that is not such an easy proposition. You know, Esther was at a beauty pageant that they say about beauty pageant contestants. When they get up and they have to speak, and they have to say something on an impromptu level, public speaking, ad-libbing. So what do they usually say? What do they want? They usually say, well, they often say, I want world peace. What would you like? I'd like world peace. Well, guess what? I'd like world peace too, even though it may surprise you, I'm not a beauty pageant contestant. I'd like world peace too. Sure, we'd all like world peace. We'd like the Jews to get along with the Arabs. We'd like the Russians to get along with the Chinese. With the English to get along with the French. The Canadians to get along with the Americans. Oh, I thought we were supposed to get along together. Well, we'll see. Maybe, I hope. And of course, we'd like in-laws to get along with their children-in-laws. We'd like husbands to get along with their wives. We'd like everybody to get along with everybody. And that's all nice. But you know where I think world peace... And by the way, can you think of a way to accomplish that? I mean, it's one thing to say, yeah, I'd like world peace. I'd like the Toronto Maple Leafs to get along with the Ottawa Senators or the Montreal Canadiens. I'd like world peace. How are you going to accomplish that? In my opinion, the Torah is telling us how in this thing with Purim and Chanukah. Because can you think of a greater polarity, a greater division, a greater separation, a greater distinction, a greater difference between the neshama and the guf? Seriously, think about it. The neshama, the spirit within us, comes from the kisei hakavod, from the holy throne of God. And the guf is made up of elements of the physical universe, the physical world. You know, as they say, the old expression is dust to dust, ashes to ash, you know. Maybe I loved it, but anyway. Yes, the Bereshit tells us God pulled up some earthly elements and breathed the soul into it. So when you think about it, these things could easily be, shall we say, in an uneasy alliance. In fact, it's my guess is that sometimes when people pass away, the neshama part of the person says, you know, it's kind of happy. It's something like, well, I'm out of here. So long. Good luck. I'm happy to be going back to the kisei hakavod. I'm happy to be going back to the spiritual realm because that's where I came from, and I can sit in the radiance of the Shekhinah up there, and good, you know, so long. You know, it's been nice knowing you. And the guf? Well, the guf is the body. The body is designed to function instinctually, and will seek pleasure, and will seek, you know, we'll seek all kinds of fulfillment in a low physical way. And does it really want sometimes? Oh, restrictions. Oh, I can't eat this because it's not kosher. Oh, I can't have I can't have unlimited physical expression. I have to rein myself in and you know, observe things like taharas mishpacha, the restrictions between relations between husbands and wives during certain times, and other restrictions in our nature. Our physical nature is one in which seeks fulfillment and gratification, and maybe doesn't want the restrictions that the spiritual places on it. So maybe the Torah is telling us, if we want world peace, if we really want to establish a world where people get along, maybe it's important for us to understand that we have elements within us that we need to reconcile before we help the world to find peace, before we help the great countries of the world, which are at loggerheads, to reconcile and to get along. Maybe we got to look a little closer first. Maybe we have to think, gee whiz, I'm a being which has something coming from upstairs, from God's holy radiance, and something which coming from downstairs, from the more base elements of life. And I really am a person who has urges and desires and tendencies which I need to rein in light of the Torah. In light of the Torah, I have to live in a certain way. But if I understand the Torah properly, that one shouldn't be without the other. It's like that song, Love and Marriage, Horse and Carriage. If you want to be a truly fulfilled, or I would say realized Jew, if you want to be a Jew who fulfills the mission of the Torah, then you have to understand that the guf and the neshama go together in a way in which they must learn to get along, in which they must learn to honor and respect one another. So that when I enjoy my Seudah on Purim, when I am making myself happy by eating all these wonderful foods and saying, wow, I'm really glad I survived physically, and I'm going to enjoy myself physically. When you're doing that, we remember because the Torah is telling us about the Beis Hamikdash. We remember, wait a minute, it's not just physical, really not just physical. I survived for a purpose, and that is to fulfill a holy purpose, and that is to bring the light of God into the world through the Torah, through the Beis Hamikdash that's coming, I hope, B'meira v'yameinu. And by the way, on Purim, when we drink, that's the purpose of it. Believe it or not, the purpose of drinking on Purim is not to get stupid. It's not to get so stupid, I'm happy, whoopee. No, the Torah the halacha tells us, ad shelo yada. You're supposed to drink to the point where your cognitive abilities are no longer functioning. Why? So you can go to a higher spiritual level. So you can, if you think about the fact that we're reading in the Torah about the Mishkan, about the holy Beis Hamikdash during the time of Purim, if you have that on your mind when you're drinking ad lo yada, up to the point where you no longer have your cognitive functioning going, if you just keep that one thought to sort of boost you in to the next level, you realize you would fulfill the purpose of drinking on Purim, which is to reach a high spiritual plane. See the way the Torah is doing this? See the way halacha is doing this? They're doing this so that we create a relationship between the guf and the neshama, the body and the soul, of which we are aware that they are disparate elements. They are different elements, but we have to create the bond between these two elements, which is based on the respect. The guf has to have respect for the neshama. The neshama has to have respect for the guf. So, in other words, when we read on Chanukah about the enjoyments we're going to be having on Purim, the celebration of Purim, we're really saying, yes, we have spiritual fulfillment on Chanukah, but don't forget the body. Don't forget our bodies were saved too, and we should enjoy that as well. When we drink on Purim, if only we could remember that there is a very serious spiritual purpose behind it. Again, the body respecting the neshama. The body has to have respect for the neshama. Our physical desires and urges have to have respect for the spiritual, the spirit above, the spiritual soul that exists within us and comes from above. If we had that idea that the mission, the purpose of drinking a lot on Purim is to reach a high spiritual plane, in addition to the physical enjoyments we're having, to do what I'm saying the Torah wants us to do, to create, so that the guf and the neshama are getting along in a high harmony, in a high synthesis, in a what's the word? Synergy. That's the word. Synergy. Okay, I got the word. Synergy. It's important to understand that the drinking on Purim that we do is to raise our spiritual level, is to raise us. We've made our bodies happy, and now we're actually permitted by halacha to try to go beyond the body into a higher spiritual realm by drinking. If, in my opinion, people had this in mind when on Purim they indulge in whiskey, if they had this in mind, this whole theme that the Torah is telling us, the connection between the guf and the neshama is one where one should honor the other, one should respect the other. We should have a good relationship so that they get along, that it's the wish of the Torah that we think of the guf and the neshama as two elements that belong together as long as we're alive, should honor and respect each other, and only then do you have the synergy, the real fulfillment of being Jewish in the world. If we had that in mind when we drink on Purim, we would do it with respect, with great respect, knowing that we're trying to reach the neshama at a time when we're celebrating the body. We're celebrating the survival of the body of the Jewish people, and we have an obligation to make our bodies happy at that time. Allah tells us, yes, but I also want you to try to reach the neshama's higher realm. If we had that in mind when we drink on Purim, I would be pretty certain that we wouldn't have these, God forbid, unfortunate incidents and tragedies that occur. So that would be my message for Purim, that yes, enjoy your physical enjoyments, but when you use spirits, they call it, alcoholic spirits, to drink on Purim, try to remember that you are trying to invoke the spirit at a time where we're enjoying the body, and that it's a very important and holy mission of the Torah that we as human beings understand the relationship between the spirit and the body, and that it has to be one of great respect for each other. The guf has to respect the spirit has to respect the body, and that, in my opinion, is the message of the Torah. When, during the time of Chanukah, we are getting all kinds of nudges and hints alluding to Purim, and when during the time of Purim, we're reading in the Torah about the Beis Hamikdash and the Holy Spirit, the holy spiritual aspect of that. So there is no great distinction, actually. The Torah is telling us, yes, they're two elements of your being. But the Torah is also telling us they go together with great respect, and they should not be separated. You should not just follow the urges of your body and try to have instant and have continuous gratification of your body and eat and do whatever it is you enjoy your body. No. You should always have the neshama in mind as well. And you should always follow the instructions and guidelines of the Torah so that you know when you're fulfilling your body physically, you're doing it in a spiritual way. You're doing it in accordance with spiritual law. That's how to get along with the neshama. And the neshama, of course, when you're being holy and concentrating on the ner neshama, the spirit inside of you, remember one thing: you are in a body, and it is the Ribboni Shel Olam's wish, it's Hashem's wish through the Torah, that we enjoy our physical bodies, honor our physical bodies, treat them with respect, and fulfill them, but with respect, so that we don't just think We're just here for our spiritual selves. We're not just here to become spiritual beings. We're here to create a balance and a relationship between the guf and the neshama, the spirit and the body. And in my opinion, if the majority of us are successful in creating this synergy, this harmony, then we will have created world peace within ourselves. And the more people achieve this harmony, you know what it says, there's a saying, Talmidei Chachamim Marbim Shalom Ba'olam. We say this every, when we read Korbanos. When we read certain sections of our prayers, which have to do with learning, we say, students who are wise students of the Torah, Talmidei Chachamim, Marbim Shalom Ba'olam, they spread peace in the world. And my reading of that phrase, of that sentence, is that when somebody who is a wise student of the Torah, Talmid Chacham, is not just how much you know, it's how you understand it, how subtle or how insightful is your understanding. That's what I think a Talmid Chacham, in my opinion, is not someone who knows a lot, but someone who understands a lot of what the Torah wants. And in my opinion, if you understand a lot of what the Torah wants, in other words, that the Torah wants us to create a harmony between the guf and the neshama, which is actually a synergy, which is something where the guf and the neshama together are more than just the sum of their parts. In my opinion, that's what that phrase means, that a true wise student of the Torah understands that we're here to try to create a balance between the guf and the neshama, a relationship, a friendship, a respect. And when you do that, then you don't have these urges fighting with each other. You don't have the guf saying, I want to go there, I got to do that, I don't want to do this. Just because the Torah says, if the guf is, if your management of your bodily intentions or your bodily needs is such that you do it in the light of the Torah, then you are creating a higher level of physical existence. And then you will be radiating, in my opinion, a peace. Having made, you see, what you've done is you've made peace within yourself. You've made peace between these two disparate elements, the neshama from above and the guf from below. You've made peace between the two by following the Torah, giving yourself all of the Torah. The rabbis tell us you can have all the pleasures in the world. And there are no pleasures that are denied to those who follow the Torah. It's just that they do it within a prescribed way. And when they do that, then they make the neshama happy. And when the neshama is happy and the guf is happy, then you have peace within yourself. And then when you have that kind of incredible peace which balances the divine and the physical, then you can't help but spread peace around you in the world. And that's what I think that phrase means, Talmidei Chachamim Marbim Shalom Be'olam. The word Marbim, of course, has a remez or has a connection to Purim, because Misha Nichnas Adar Marbim B'Simcha. There's a connection there. The idea was, what does that say? What does that mean? That means from the time of Adar, before Purim, the month of Adar, we start to increase our joy. And Marbim is a very important word. Marbim Shalom Ba'olam. You increase the peace in the world. And that's, in my opinion, the way you can have world peace. If you create that balance of the guf and the neshama, if you make peace within yourself of the body and the spirit, then you yourself will radiate peace to the world. And the more people we can get to do that, then it's possible. Peace on earth is possible. It's possible, of course, it's going to happen when Mashiach comes. And in my opinion, that balance is what's key. But in the meantime, we can create peace around us by remembering that it's not necessarily outside the important work to be done. The important work to be done is what we all have. And it's very simple. Enjoy your life, your physical life. Don't deny yourself pleasures. Don't deny yourself. Enjoy. The Torah wants you to enjoy yourself. That's Purim. But do it in the light of Chanukah, in the light of the holy temple, in the light of the holy temple, in the light of the Shekhinah, in the light of the Spirit, the Neshama. So when we do that, in my opinion, you will have created peace within yourself, and you will be able to communicate it to others. That's it. I can't say anymore. This is my reading of why the Torah wants us to think about Purim on Chanukah, and vice versa. Around the time on Purim, the Torah wants us to think about Chanukah, the establishment of the Beis HaMikdash. And that's about it. I can't say any more, except I wish everybody good luck in doing this, because this, in my opinion, is the real key to world peace. Happy Chanukah, and later on, Happy Purim. One final comment. God is hidden in the Megillah, and yet we believe that he worked all these miracles from behind the scenes. Similarly, in Chanukah, we understand that God may have made some trouble for the Greek Assyrians on the far-flung reaches of their empire, so that they had to dispatch all kinds of troops to the far reaches of their empire, and thus thin out the troops in Jerusalem. All of these are, we believe, actions of God when he is hidden. Still miracles. Of course, we say it's a time of miracles, that the Maccabees should overcome superior forces, that all the Jews could be threatened in Persia and be saved. These are miracles which are done by the hidden God. And this is the message of Chanukah and Purim to us, that even though God isn't doing something open like splitting the Red Sea, Sea of Reeds, splitting the sea, or making food, manna, fall from heaven, or speaking from the top of Mount Sinai, even though these great open miracles are not being done, the message of Chanukah and Purim, and they go together, are that even though God is hidden during this time, he is still doing miracles on our behalf. And we should have faith, and we should take heart that God is still there, looking after us, taking care of us, and working behind the scenes until such time as he deems it correct for him to once again reveal himself in an open and manifest way. So until then, we should still maintain our faith, look to Chanukah, look to Purim as our evidence that even though he is hidden, God is still working on our behalf.
For Esther and Mordecai, they were standing on thin ice, but Bezrat Hashem, it turned out all right.
Happy Chanukah.